And next, our next regular Outlook webinar coming up on the 17th of August is going to be given by Brian Fuchs from the National Drought Mitigation Center in Lincoln. Today, this afternoon, I'd like to start by looking at an overview of our region and past and really last season or so, looking a little bit behind or historically, and then we're going to talk about some impacts across the region of that weather and climate, and I'm going to shift over then to Adnan to talk specifically about the Northern Great Plains drought and give an update. Then we'll shift once again back to me with an outlook looking ahead and end that hopefully with some time for questions. Well, starting here with an overview of where we've been recently, I'm going to start with June temperatures. This is a map here, a portrayal of departure from normal temperatures for the month of June here on the right. And basically, much of the region was near to above normal. And depending on where you were, the southern and eastern parts of the region were closer to normal, while as you went west and north from there, the departures got a little bit larger. You can see from this particular graphic, from a degree or two below to about 4 degrees above normal specifically for the month. In terms of historical rankings, if we look at June by state, this image shows what the temperature ranking for June mean temperatures were statewide, and for much of our region, again, the Ohio Valley, parts of the Great Lakes, you can see sort of in the middle of the pack, and then as you go north and west, we move to more above average. For reference here, these rankings are created from 1895 to the present, so the highest value you can have here theoretically is 123, and the lowest, of course, would be 1. But again, normal to above normal for the month of June in terms of mean temperatures. Now, there have been some changes in the recent few weeks, and so I've updated this to include up to the recent past. This one goes really through the 3rd week of June through a couple days ago in July. And I think the thing to note here is, if you look at the map, again, our region, that we have negative departures across much of the central and eastern part of the region, and that, of course, has been associated with a very, very well active storm track and a great deal of rain in some places. So we've actually got some significant cooler than normal anomalies, especially over portions of the Great Lakes region. While as we move west, again, this is a pattern you're going to see over and over again. Once we get to the upper Missouri Valley, we're back to much above normal temperatures for the recent past. Precipitation, also, this is even more extreme now. You're going to start to see a pattern that's going to be repeated over and over again with regard to precipitation. During the month of June, a wide variety of precip totals here, ranging from less than ½ of an inch in parts of the High Plains and the Northern Great Plains to more than 10 inches in portions of the Great Lakes. You can see a couple of little areas here, Michigan, Missouri. We'll look at those in a little bit more detail here shortly. So again, we have a very, very wide range of precipitation totals during the month, and of course, a wide range of conditions as a result. In the lower left here, you can see the same thing for June as a percent of normal. Note here that the reds are all below normal, and then we move to the green, we get back to near to slightly above normal, and then as we move to the purples and pinks, these are much above normal. So this is going to be probably one of the widest swings or widest range in percentages that you're going to see in our region. So everything from less than 25% of normal to more than 300% of normal on the same map. That's quite unusual. In terms of our rankings, again, for the precipitation for the month, from much, much below normal in portions of the Great Plains. You can see Nebraska here, the second driest on record back to 1895, all the way up to much above normal. And you can see a couple of the Great Lakes states are way up, nearing at least the top 10% or so, and then everything in between. For the 3-month period, the April through June period, similar pattern shows up. So this is, June was a bit of a continuation of where we'd been earlier in the spring. For our mean temperatures rankings, you can see values up here commonly 80s, 90s, 100s. So typically in the above normal category for that time frame. Precipitation, again, like the totals we just saw here in the last image, a wide disparity from much below normal in the northern plains to much above normal. You can see we're approaching top 5 wettest here in a couple states up in Wisconsin and in Michigan. But much of the central and eastern part of the region did turn out wetter than normal for that time frame. This is an update now using the multi-sensor precipitation estimates, which incorporate radar to help us get a little bit better spatial feel, and they really tell a story looking at this wide disparity in precipitation. In the upper left here, we have observed 30-day totals from the 20th I guess it's the 20th of June through the 19th of July on the top. Below that is the percent of normal for that same time frame. So these are both 30-day precipitation totals. And then for reference, I've put the 90-day observed totals here on the right. And the color scales are a little bit different here, but and it's almost reverse what it typically is in some of these maps. But at least for the 30-day here, you can see once again less than 1 inch or less than half an inch in many parts of the northern Great Plains. More than 10 inches, contrasting that. Southern Wisconsin, northern Missouri, parts of the Ohio Valley here, Indiana and Ohio. And you can see how that's expressed in terms of a departure from normal, more than 6 inches above normal to more than 2 inches or 3 inches below normal. So a huge range. And then if we look at the 3-month totals here, this is pretty impressive for parts of the Ohio Valley. You can see that in some cases we've had more than 25 inches just in that 3-month period. So way above normal. Part of this I would also note here, down here in the middle Mississippi Valley and parts of the Ohio Valley were the remnants of Tropical Storm Cindy, which made landfall late in June. That's a fairly early visit for a tropical disturbance, but some of that moisture did come up with that particular storm and impacted the southeastern part of our region. In terms of impacts from the weather we've talked about, well, we've mentioned heavy rain, and I'll start there because Adnan's going to focus on what's happening in the northern plains. But this is a fairly common sight, or was a fairly common sight over the last couple of weeks in many parts of the Great Lakes and Ohio Valley regions here. This one particularly happens to be near Saginaw in Michigan in late June. Overall, in terms of the impacts, we've already seen some of the data here, highly variable conditions across the region, and again, current conditions ranging from excessively wet to excessively dry and everything in between. A number of specific areas that were impacted here, flash flooding in southeastern Wisconsin, northeast Illinois during the second week of July, and you can see some of the impacts associated with that. Lots of flooding. Same thing with Ohio. You saw the title page with an image from that particular flooding event, which was on the 14th of July. Some rivers in these areas either reached or were just below all-time records, and which is a bit unusual also for this time of the year. In terms of agricultural impacts, a couple things to note. Obviously, we have problems with lack of water and moisture stress, and again, Adnan will address those here in just a moment. But in the eastern part of the region, because of the heavy rains, we've had a different type of problem. Much of that had to do with delayed field work, delayed planting, and actually a reduction in sometimes the condition of the crop given standing water. Some crops were actually had to be replanted, and in some cases they were even lost. Here in Michigan, we had, in particular, sugar beets were a problem, and that crop tends to be grown on relatively heavy soils and level soils that don't drain very well. And so in some areas, the excessive water did cause a number of problems. With the excessive wetness, field work delays were very common, and weed pressure has been higher than normal as a result of that. We've also had recently some problems with harvesting forage, hay and alfalfa, and also our winter wheat harvest, which is proceeding now into northern parts of the production area in the Midwest. As a result of all the rain and somewhat cooler temperatures as of late, crop development in many cases is either at or a little bit behind where it typically is this time of the year, and that's a combined thing. But there have also been, again, just delays physically because people were not able to get out into the field. Soil moisture across this follows our precipitation chart very, very closely. There's some of the precipitation numbers we saw, and again, these are expressed in terms of percentiles versus historical averages, and you can see the very, very, very dry conditions, low values of soil moisture here. I believe this is in the top 2 meters is what's being simulated here in this particular model. And everything from, well, less than 10% in the northern Great Plains to more than 95% here in the Great Lakes and portions of the Ohio Valley. One area I'd like to point out or bring to your attention is an area in parts of the central Corn Belt here, extending from near the Sioux Falls area in northwest Iowa, northeast Nebraska, extending east-southeastward down through portions of Iowa into west central Illinois. And that's an area that has seen drier than normal conditions, notably here over the last several weeks. And many of the indices, soil moisture indices, et cetera, are starting to pick up on dryness there. It's been noted in some of the crop progress reports as well. And you can start to see that a little bit in some of the other images I'm going to show, especially this one. This is the evaporative stress index, which is essentially a measure of the water demand or the actual water use of a landscape versus what it could or could potentially could use. And the lower that ratio, of course, the more water stress is there. This particular stress, also like the soil moisture index you just saw, is expressed in terms of historical averages. So these browns and reds here are areas where that actual evapotranspiration is a very, very small fraction of the potential. In contrast, the greens and the dark greens, especially here, are areas relative to the past where we have basically no shortage of water at all. And the pattern that we've seen, it just shows up over and over again, the drought and extreme drought conditions up here in the northern plains. Note also, though, that we are spreading, some of that stress is also spreading east and southeast into portions of Iowa, Illinois, and Missouri. That's an area I think we'll want to watch here carefully over the next couple of weeks. Much of the Great Lakes region, the Ohio Valley, you can see very, very green. And that's indicative, again, of all the water that's fallen. Certainly no problem with water in that part of the region. Our latest U.S. drought monitor it's very, very close to what you've just seen here in terms of images and the pattern across the region. Much of the problem with drought is out here in the western part of the region, especially the northern Great Plains. We have a couple pockets. Here's the one I just mentioned here, portions of Iowa into Illinois, but at this point in time it's still D0 or D1. We have a few areas up here in northeast Illinois, southern Michigan, where we're still a little abnormally dry, but these areas have received precipitation over the last week to 10 days, so things are improving there. The real focus here, again, is out in the western and northern part of the region. And I put the Palmer Drought Severity Index in here just as another version of this because it looks at both deficits and excess in long term. And we rarely see maps with this much diversity in them. Everything from severe drought in the northern plains to very or extremely moist conditions. Just a huge, huge variety of conditions across the region currently. Looking at stream flow and some hydro, and this is another interesting point, and Adnan will talk about this as well, and that is the idea that even in the area of extreme drought in the northern Great Plains, that those conditions have come on probably much more quickly than typically is the case following a wetter than normal fall and winter in that area. But now we do see a fairly dramatic reduction in terms of stream flow across the northern plains. Note, though, that in the Great Lakes and Ohio Valley, our stream flows are running at much above normal or above normal levels across most of the recording stations here. And I threw on a couple of extra images here that indicate, these are time series, one for the Great Lakes in an area of wetness, and you can see basically the increase in stream flow over the last several weeks. Contrast that with the northern Great Plains. This is the Missouri Basin. Now note, this is the entire Missouri Basin. It would be a little bit different from that if we only looked at the northern portion of it. But note that actually, as taken as a whole, it isn't that far right now for the whole basin from normal. And I think the point probably is that the drought conditions up here in this part of the country so far have been primarily agricultural, or the impacts have been agricultural and not as much hydrological yet. But of course, if those conditions continue, that will change relatively rapidly. In the Great Lakes, our water levels, we've got here water levels for the past couple years and then projected out for the next several months. Lake Superior here, the upper left, Michigan Huron, lower left, and then Lake Erie over here in the right. All of them are running well above normal. We could even say, a matter of fact, for Lake Superior, we're up pretty close, only a few inches away from historical highs. The same is true also in Lake Erie. We're still got a ways to go in Lake Michigan Huron, but note, ever since the spring of 2014, when we had a dramatic reversal of water levels here, we've been running well above normal. And with the projections looking into the summer, the remainder of the fall, and into the beginning of the winter, you can see all three of these suggest that water levels will continue to run at well above the long-term averages. In terms of temperature for the Great Lakes, this is recent. These are surface temperatures, and you can see that they range from the mid-70s across Erie, which is usually the warmest lake of all the five, to the 60s across the Huron, Michigan basin, to the mid and upper 50s across Lake Superior. There are a few normals to look at these. I was trying to get some comparisons. It looks like Michigan, Huron, and Erie are fairly close to where they typically are this time of the year. Lake Superior may be running a few degrees cooler than normal, and again, that's probably not surprising given the air temperatures that have been running cooler than normal recently as well. One word about crop condition. This is the most recent report from NASS. And looking at corn here, so an annual summer crop, and where we are at the current point, and this point in time, at least as of the 16th, in terms of condition, the percent of the crop in good or excellent condition. Up at the top here, you can see that 2017, we've seen a bit of a downturn here during the first half of July. And remember, this is the entire country. This is not, even though the vast majority of production for corn is in the Midwest, it's still taking the whole country into account, but it has fallen off several points here since the end of June, early July, and relative to the last several years, you can see we're down here with 2013, so a little bit below where we've been in recent years. Another thing to note here too, especially about corn, but also to some extent about soybeans, phenologically we are now at or have entered or will be entering very soon the sensitive silking anthesis stage for corn. Soybeans were in bloom in many cases and will be setting pods over the next couple of weeks. So these stages or phenological growth stages are relatively more sensitive, and so weather conditions here over the next week or two could have a relatively higher impact on these crops, especially should we see a continuation of the heat and dryness that we've experienced over the last few weeks. With that, I'd like to hand off the baton to my colleague Adnan, who's going to give us an update on the Plains drought. Adnan?
Thank you, Jeff. Let me accept the sharing my screen, and I will run my PowerPoint presentation. Can you all see my screen?
We're good.
Okay. Well, I am going to piggyback on Jeff's acknowledging the partners, and I am representing North Dakota, South Dakota, and the Montana, the upper, the Great Plains, but it doesn't mean that I was alone. I had received a tremendous amount of support from these partners, especially the state climatologists of um, the region. I am appreciative. This is the drought monitor that earlier you saw in the larger scale. You notice that the majority of the red and darker red colors indicating D3 and D4 areas are limited to um, North Dakota, Montana, and South Dakota. So it is fair to say that we are in the epicenter of the current drought right now as we speak. And the numbers in the first row is telling us the current percent coverage of the region. And this week, first time the D4 or the exceptional drought is introduced into drought monitor. It's been for a while for North Dakota case, for example, it's been since 2006 since D4 was introduced. This is how we got here. I am going to start with fall. That might surprise many of the other folks living in the down south, but in our area, the northern plains, the precipitation that falls in fall dictates sometimes or give us an early warning system what might happen in spring, especially the floods in the Red River is positively correlated with wetter than normal fall conditions, or if it is drier than normal, it gives us an early warning of maybe a drought coming in the spring. The reason for that is the precipitation that falls in fall somehow is locked underneath the frozen layer, just like putting your money in a savings account in a bank and you only utilize it when you need it. Well, this is what we did in spring. The numbers here are, the larger the number, whether the conditions are. 123, as Jeff said, is the larger number. So if you want to know the ranking in these locations, you need to subtract these numbers from 123 to know if it is a first, second, or third wettest on record that started in 1895. So large numbers are a big deal. Winter 2016-17 is again for the Dakotas areas and the Montana, it was wetter than normal. So in fact, together winter and summer, some of these states, especially North Dakota, was the seventh or the ninth wettest 6 months in a history. And fall and the winter together, they were extremely wet in these areas, indicating that perhaps we shouldn't be talking about drought in the coming spring. But the spring came both the month-wise in March, April, and May, and also the June was unusually dry, and in fact the spring 2007 was unusually dry, sixth driest in these locations, and the ninth driest in the northeastern portions of North Montana. And when you add June 2, northeastern portions of the North Dakota is the driest 4 months in a row in this part. Second driest, second, third driest in the southwest North Dakota, and fifth driest in the north central South Dakota. These are very impressive numbers when you consider that the years that we are dealing with is 123 years, starting from 1895. This is to give us a historical perspective of where we stand. It is an unusual graphic. I gotta explain what these numbers are. So what I am doing here is multiplying the D0 coverage with 1, adding it to the area of the D1 coverage with 2, and so forth, to give more emphasis on the area that is under the greater D, the coverage. So for North Dakota, the number is 272. The greater the number, worse the drought conditions are. For example, if 100% of a state is covered under D4, this number would have been 500. So this number ranges from 500 to 0, 0 being the best and 500 being the worst. So this allows me to say where we stand historically. 272 is last exceeded in 2006. So I am comfortably say that in North Dakota, the current drought is the worst drought since 2006. And by the way, 2006 was the last time North Dakota experienced D4 or exceptional drought. If I do the same thing for South Dakota, South Dakota's numbers are 248. It was last exceeded in 2012 and 2013. So it is fair to say that the current drought in South Dakota is the worst one since 2013. And in fact, 391 was the highest number South Dakota experienced since the inception of the National Drought Mitigation Center. If I do the same thing for Montana, Montana looks quite different than the both states that you saw earlier. The number for North Dakota, Montana is 172. However, you have to keep in mind that is the percent area, and obviously Montana is a lot larger than the states in North Dakota and South Dakota as well. So you got to keep that in mind. 172 was last exceeded in 2012. So as well in Montana, the current drought is the worst drought since 2012. And incidentally, it allows me to see some of the past droughts in Montana lasting mega years, and starting from 2000 to 2005. And one other advantage using these kind of indices allows me to say or see how long the current drought lasted. Comparison between the 2006 and 2017 in spatial scale, and you notice that these numbers might be the same, but spatially it is going to be different than the others. This is the approximate percent of corn located in drought. This is the latest numbers. 2% is in exceptional drought areas D4 in North Dakota, and 6% in D3 in South Dakota. And this one is soybean in drought areas. 3% in D3 in South Dakota, 8% in D3 in North Dakota. And this one is the hay. It is showing the state distribution of the hay and drought area. 8% in D4 exceptional drought in North Dakota, and 11% in D3 in South Dakota. Cattle in drought, 6% is in North Dakota. In D4, South Dakota is 7%. And the wheat, winter versus spring wheat, South Dakota has 20% of the area covered in winter wheat is under D3, and Montana is 14% in D3. And when you come to North Dakota, it is the 12% in D4 and 37% in D3. In terms of the spring wheat, South Dakota has 33% in D3. Montana has 40% in D3, but 2% in D4. And North Dakota has 28% in D3, but 10% in D4. So another way of looking at the stream flow map Jeff showed earlier, except this one, it is the below normal 7-day average stream flow compared to historical stream flow. The red area in North Dakota is indicating the lowest, and this is useful for detecting the hydrological drought. And this is South Dakota, and I see a large portion of the South Dakota in northwestern portion is between 6 to 9% or 8 to 10 the percentile. This is the soil moisture in the topsoil, short or very short. Percentile for this time of the growing season. It shows that the 5 percentile, meaning that the 95% of the time the topsoil temperature this time of the year was the greater than the current one. And for Montana, it is 3 percentile. South Dakota is the 6 percentile. Forecast for the fire danger class for July 20 for today. South Dakota and North Dakota is in green and perhaps a little better, showing the moderate to low fire danger rating. However, when you get into Montana, you get into the orange and the red, indicating very high and extreme fire danger in those parts of the world. And some of the I'm going to try to minimize this so I have full access to my slide. Some of the concern with the fire drought that came with the Bureau of Indian Affairs, since the fire occurs in the dry soil, it is possible that the root system might be burning as well. Some scenes from the drought areas. This is the very same field as Jeff's picture in the initial, where a person is holding a kernel of wheat, and actually that kernel didn't grow. It was the wheat that didn't have any kernel, so the insurance adjuster zeroed out that field. So this is the same field that what it looks like. It looks like it's a normal, perhaps a little drier than normal wheat field, but when you get into really close to and hold these heads and then squeeze in your hands, you will notice that there is no grain in this field. And this picture is from Montana, taken between Fort Peck and Glasgow, sent to me by, or it was taken by the Mike Franzen, and showing the cracks in the soil. The next picture is sent to me by Laura, and then Vicky Stewart took the picture and then sent it to her. It's Tripp County, South Dakota, showing dry field and the cattle walking and creating tremendous amount of dust. And the next picture is the Sheridan County in North Dakota, sent by Nicole Wardner, which is the county agent, showing cutting off the hay field. It looks like a grass, very short, and it looks like nothing is really coming out of it. Some of the other impacts are seed yields. Yes, we have drought and the crops may be limited, but many are concerned about the next year. Do we have enough seeds? And seed quality may be affected through the drought. And when you harvest these the crops for cattle, and the concern is the dry stalks create nitrate accumulation in the plants. So the concern is that
Hey, Adnan, we've lost your signal. Are you there? Adnan, maybe you've lost my signal. Okay, Jeff, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
But we can't hear Adnan, can we?
No, it somehow died out.
Well, that's great. Let me just check something. Sorry about that. Lost Adnan. Yes, we'll check on that just a minute here. Let me do something to him. Sorry about this, Adnan. Hey, Jeff, I'm going to shift over to your Outlook section. We'll try to get him back on. So we'll go straight. Is that okay?
That's fine. That sure is. Do you have my screen yet?
Well, I see Northern Great Plains drought update. Hold on.
That was my fault.
Oh,
You should
okay.
see
Yeah, I see outlooks. Yep. Go ahead.
Okay. Well, the question is, again, we've seen all sorts of unusual weather, and of course the question is, where do we go from here? And that's what I want to spend the next several minutes looking at. And I want to start by saying, and I know for many of you right now, we're under another heat wave this summer, and a couple things of note here. These are current watches and warnings from the National Weather Service here on the left. These were taken this morning, but a couple of notice here, again, just to illustrate some of the craziness that we've seen. Large area with either excessive heat warnings or heat advisories across large portions of the southern plains and up into the Midwest. We've got a red flag warning out up in the high plains into Montana, Idaho, and again, in contrast, we've got flood watches for portions of the upper Midwest, Wisconsin, Minnesota, and Iowa. But one unusual aspect here of the current heat wave, though, look at the dew point temperatures. That's what this particular image is here on the right. We have dew point temperatures currently over much of the Midwest at 65 Fahrenheit or greater, and in the area here, even as you go down into the southern half of the region, 70 Fahrenheit or greater. And I would also note that this was taken from, it was taken from earlier this morning, and when you think about dew was still evaporating probably at that point in time, that those values are probably even higher now. So we have dew point temperatures we did in the last couple of days that were up, in many cases, up in the upper 70s, which is near the climatological limits for many of these areas. So extreme levels of humidity combined or coupled with very, very high temperatures, and the result, of course, is just oppressive heat. And so that's certainly one of the issues here in the short term, and as we'll see, that it may come back again. It's under a big dome of high pressure across the central part of the country, and that probably will return before too much longer. Just as importantly, what about water, especially for the drought areas within our region? This is the precipitation forecast here for the next week out through the 27th, next Thursday, and it's basically what the numerical forecast guidance is suggesting about our future. You can see a couple things here. One is that we're going to have a couple more impulses move around this big upper air ridge that's parked out over the western part of the country, and that's going to lead to, showers and thunderstorms, just like it has over the last couple of months. With some potentially locally heavy rains, more than an inch over, again, much of the upper Midwest, Great Lakes, into the Ohio Valley, and that's just a broken record. Note also that here for the northern plains suggests much less in the way of precipitation for the areas that really need it the most. Another thing, too, that you can notice here, there's a large area in the southwest of significant precipitation, and of course this is associated with subtropical moisture out of the Pacific and the southwestern monsoon, which has set up circulation here over the last couple of weeks, but it's expected, or we're expecting to see some moisture from that over the next several days, and some of that will reach parts of the region we're talking about here in portions of the high plains and the Front Range, as far north as Colorado, perhaps Wyoming. So basically more of the same, I think, is some of the pattern that we're seeing here with the short-term forecast guidance. In terms of specific hazards identified by the National Weather Service, I mentioned we saw the excessive heat here recently, and note that there's another episode possibly coming up at the end of next week into next weekend, so that's something to keep an eye on. Drought continues up in the northern plains. That's not a surprise at all. And here out in the southwest, just to our west, is the area, again, impacted by those monsoonal thunderstorms coming in from the south and west. So several themes here, but in general, for the short term, more of the same type of weather we've seen recently is expected. I'm going to run through the 6 to 10 day and 8 to 14 day outlooks here really quickly. In both of these, you're going to see the temperature outlook on the left panel, the precipitation outlook on the right. This is the upper air panel in the middle, but not too many changes really from where we've been for much of July so far. Here's that ridge out over the high plains and out over the western part of the U.S. Some northwesterly flow a week over the Great Lakes and into the east. But in general, a continuation of above normal temperatures over almost all the region except for the far east. Precipitation normal to below normal for the same time frame. Very few changes in the 8 to 14 day time frame that takes us into the beginning of August. Above normal temperatures again for almost all of the area, especially for again for the drought-stricken areas, as well as below normal precipitation. Now, there is one important factor to take into account here for both of these outlooks, and they're consistent, which is something one looks for. But the issue is that the numerical forecast guidance, which is the primary input material here, there are differences in different model families. And as a result of this, the confidence of the forecaster confidence in these outlooks is thought to be significantly below normal or below what it might be at this time of the year. So that's something to take into account as we look at least in the medium range forecast guidance. Moving out further here into our seasonal outlooks, I'll only say a couple things about El Nino Southern Oscillation, or ENSO, and that is, of course, there had been possibly some expectations of another El Nino event this fall. There still is a small chance, but basically the forecast now is for neutral conditions. So that is near normal or zero temperature departures here for the Nino 3.4 region in the equatorial Pacific. This is the consolidation forecast, looking at all the different forecasts for the next several months of sea surface temperatures in the equatorial Pacific. And again, the consolidation says that we'll probably be very, very close to zero or neutral. And that's, I believe, statistically or probabilistically, the odds are somewhere on the order of 50 to 55% for that neutral scenario. So neither El Nino or La Nina likely in the cards for at least the majority of the upcoming year. For our seasonal outlooks specifically, and these were just issued by the Climate Prediction Center this morning. This is the new ensemble for the month of August. Above normal temperatures, not just for the entire region, but for much of the country, with the exception of the southwest. And again, that's associated with what's expected to be a fairly active southwest monsoon, at least early here in the month of August. So much of our area is in the equal chance category, equal odds of below, near, and above normal, including, again, the drought-stricken northern Great Plains. For the 3-month period, August through October, many similarities. Above normal mean temperatures are projected for virtually the entire country, and just like for what we saw for August, mostly equal chance. So we've seen some differences in these outlooks over the last couple months, but I think the bottom line here probably is, again, some of the tools and some of the pieces of information that are used to create the outlooks are not very strong at this point in time. So there's not a lot of certainty about direction, especially for precipitation. That's a critical factor, of course, for that drought area in our region. So summarizing here, well, again, variability is the theme, I think, that you've seen here, but extreme drought in parts of the region and excessive wetness in others. And we have crop conditions reflecting that each way, from very, very, in terms of lack of moisture and in terms of too much. The short and medium term guidance here for the next couple of weeks suggests warmer than normal temperatures and possibly for below normal precip. That of course, would not be a positive outlook or could exacerbate the existing issues that we have in the northern plains. Looking further ahead, neutral conditions for ENSO expected through the winter, or the upcoming winter, 2017 and 2018. And our long lead outlooks essentially are warmer than normal. Most all of the mean temperatures through the fall and into the winter are or at least the early part of the winter, are suggesting normal to above normal mean temperatures. Precip generally in that equal chances category, so not much direction with precip. And with that, I don't know, Adnan, have you been able to?
Yes, can you hear me?
Hey, yeah, we can hear you, Adnan. And before we flip back, I just want to, if you would, Jeff, go back to the 8 to 14 day for an example of the forecast. Just one thing I want to say about both that one and the next one, is, and I think we said this before, where you see a high probability, these are probabilities, these aren't absolute predictions. So where you see I think it's a 70 bullseye over the drought area over Montana, North Dakota, and South Dakota out there on the left-hand side of your screen, that's actually a very strong indication, a confidence level of the forecasters believe that area is going to be warmer than normal for this week period. On the precipitation side, as Jeff mentioned, you see much lower probabilities there. Those are indicating a tendency towards dryness, but they're by no means a strong and confident forecast. So you see, the difference is the percentages. These are, again, probabilities. Like, you hear on the forecast there's a 20% chance of rain tonight. These are similar to that. They actually have more detail than that, but generally speaking, probability is not absolutes. I wanted to make sure you all saw that. And if you'd flip to August, yeah. Again, you see the probabilities there in August of above normal temperatures are, it says 50, there's a 50 there, which is a relatively strong, for a month forecast like that, it's a relatively strong prediction. I'm guessing that a lot of that prediction is coming in the first half of the month, and the second half of the month, we'll see, right? So, and that's just based on the next few weeks. We're going into August pretty soon here, and we can look out fairly accurately that far and see that it's going to stay relatively warm. This particular map will be updated at the end of July. And again, the precipitation outlook is pretty light. In other words, the probabilities are pretty low there. So, and the EC means there's an equal chance of near normal, below normal, and above normal precipitation. So we can always hope for the high end on that one, I guess. That's all I wanted to sort of re-clarify for everybody. Anything else you wanted to say about that, Jeff or Adnan?
Just that I think collectively the outlooks, the guidance is just there's not as much confidence in this
right.
particular set of outlooks, which is unfortunate given what we have, but it is what it is. Yeah,
and I'd also say summer is one of the worst times to try to forecast precipitation. It's just very difficult, and we have said that before as well. That green area in the southwest is indicating a relatively strong monsoon. So we have better indicators for that than we do of the rest of the country. Well, I guess we can leave it at that. Okay, Adnan, we can come back to these later if there are other questions. But
yeah,
Adnan, I want to...
while we are here, it might be also important to mention that temperature has a higher percent of coming true or better forecast for temperature than precipitation.
Yeah, the temperature forecasts generally are have more skill. Right. Okay, Adnan, I'm sending it back to you.
Yes, I apologize for the technical difficulty. Can you see my screen?
Yeah, that's about where we left off.
Okay, well, we are running out of time. I'm quickly going to go through, but the point is all these commodities, all these crops, the current situations are a lot lower than last year. One last note is the water impact. I am going to shrink this so you can see more of my screen. The Rocky Boys Reservation in Montana has enough water to last about 7 to 10 days. That was a message that was prescribed to me from Montana about a couple of days ago. Drought impact is continuing. Some of the economic impact, a business losing $30 million in addition to 58 employees directly related to drought. And the cattle and the cows are losing 2.5 pounds per week weight per day in Montana. And some anecdotal testimony is coming from Montana comparing the current drought in the past. This person is saying that it is really worse than the '88 drought. And in Bowman County, North Dakota, when the crop adjuster they came and assessed the wheat crop earlier, In the spring, it was assessed at 35 to 40 bushels per acre, but now about a week ago, it is down 2.4 bushels per acre. In South Dakota, grasshopper problems, they are moving from grasses into the row crops and looking for green plants. And also some crops being sampled for nitrates, indicating that these crops are being thought to feed as to the kettles. This one is the wheat market, passed to me by Dufresne Olson at NDSU, showing that the market prices are highly volatile, hinged upon the wheat. For example, the Minneapolis Grain Exchange for the September future market price at the beginning of the month in June 1st was $5.77 per bushel, but now recently, this is yesterday, it was assessed at 7.75 per bushel. So the lower the amount of the available the wheat, higher the prices. So it is really impacting everything. Some of the other impacts, for example, in North Dakota is the blue-green algae poisonous to livestock and wildlife and the humans. It is due to the not moving or steady the water. Some of the drought responses to these impacts are the governors of the 3 above mentioned states waiving the restrictions to permit east transport of water, hay, and livestock. USDA gave authorization for early haying and CPR acres beginning on July 16. Ranchers in Dakotas and the Montana during drought. In addition to USDA FSA program, the North Dakota Water Commission has enacted water supply assistance. CRP becoming available for haying and grazing areas are depicted in green, and the contingency areas are in the red and the yellow planted areas. Some of the other response are FSA loans. A 12-month exemption is brought by the FSA. The feed list open for the ranchers in NDSU, and both of these hotline from USDA and the NDSU is acting like a matchmaking of the haze that is available and the people who needs haze. With one website, they bring them together. Some of the other drought responses are secretarial disaster designation in North Dakota, 23 primary counties and 8 contiguous counties. In South Dakota, 8 primary counties and 10 contiguous counties. In Montana, 14 primary counties and 13 contiguous counties. We have already done the outlook.
Thanks, Adnan and Jeff, for the presentation. We can, as far as I'm concerned, we can go a little longer. I know people have to get off, but there are several questions. One real quick question was, can we get copies of these presentations? And Jennifer, we do put these online in the next 24 hours or so. They're PDF form, so if you really want the actual presentation, the actual PowerPoint presentation, you can contact me, doug.cluck@noaa.gov, and I'll send those to you as long as Adnan and Jeff think that's okay. PDF is fine. Okay. Well, we get those on the air. The email that we send out, maybe you don't get that, but there's an email that goes out that says here's where the recording is going to be, and here's where we put the PDF file. So they'll all be there. Hopefully within the next 24 hours, by tomorrow at some point. Another question we had was from Benjamin Diamond, a couple questions actually. He simply asked if more corn and soybeans is grown in the eastern, North and South Dakota, in the western parts that's currently in drought, and that's surely the case. However, Adnan, maybe since you covered that, you can talk about you know, how soybean and corn crops in the eastern part of the state are doing, even though they're under, maybe not under as severe drought conditions.
Based on the comments that's coming from the field and based on my view, the both corn and soybean in the eastern, especially in the eastern and northeastern portion of the state, are looking actually good. But when you come to the western North Dakota, things may look green at the time, but when you get into the field, you will realize that thinning the area, and there are more barren locations. The crops might be 50% shorter than it is supposed to be, and when you hold the grains, and you will realize that the kernels are not filling. So these kind of conditions can only be seen when you really get close. And as you move to the western North Dakota, and there is no reason for you to get really close from distance, what you see is clear indication of the drought impact in those portions of the states.
And based on the forecast, what are the chances of improvement of those of corn and soybeans, mainly in North and South Dakota? We get that question a lot, actually. And,
well,
and I can't answer that. Yeah,
forecast
based on the forecast.
Yeah, forecast that we saw based on the 8 to 14 days, 6 to 10 days, and the July, I mean, the August forecast is not showing any promising relief. For some of the locations in the eastern Montana and western North Dakota, additional precipitation may be just too late, because we have in the field irreversible impacts are going on in the field. Additional precipitation in August may green up the crops a little, but it is certainly not going to help the volume.
Yeah. Now this one, actually, the next two questions come from Bryce Anderson, who has left the conference, but I thought they were good questions. So, you know, he says, would you classify this year's drought as a flash drought, since we went from relatively wet conditions in the winter to in just 4 months a very serious or severe drought?
I would certainly call it flash drought, and some of the reason for that would be the drastic change in the precipitation pattern from fall, winter into spring. However, the impact had been occurring early in the spring, in April and earlier May, was masked by the crops utilizing the soil moisture from the previous 2 seasons. So if the previous 2 seasons wasn't as wet, we would have been in a lot worse condition.
Does anybody else have any other questions? If you do, raise your hand. There's a little way to do that. Or if you want to hear more about a particular subject, feel free to raise your hand or ask a question. Yes, that's a good point. Brian Fuchs brings up the issue about the late freeze that you had in North and South Dakota that really was like insult to injury. You want to address that at all, Adnan?
Yeah, we were on the call yesterday with Laura, South Dakota state climatologist, and she had a good point. When it is dry the way it is, and you would find yourself into or expose yourself into temperature extremes, if the air temperature, if the air is dry, it cools down a lot faster than if it contained moisture. So it is, I wouldn't say highly common, but we shouldn't be surprised to see freeze, especially early in the mornings when the temperatures, dew point temperatures are low. Temperatures could easily get to the dew point temperature. If the dew point temperature is at freezing temperature, it would be a very common meteorological event.
Yeah, I think that a couple things. One is we were relating it to the actual freeze that happened, I think, in June, and set back some corn crops in part of South Dakota and maybe North Dakota. That episode, right?
Yes.
Yeah, and I think Brian was trying to make the point of saying that not all the ag-related impacts are drought-related this year, and so in other words, there are some other aspects that are sort of impacting crops out there. We got another question, and we didn't really report on it, but the reason we didn't report on it was that they're doing fine. The reservoirs in the Missouri River, as far as that goes, the main stem river and the reservoirs are where they should be. There's no water issues with those. It actually usually takes a number of years before those levels start dropping off, and you also sort of need a lower snowpack than what they realized this year. So the main stem river really isn't showing and probably won't show a lot of impact through the rest of the year. Now, if this continues into next year or the drought expands in some way, yeah, you might start seeing some impacts to the big reservoirs. Barb, I see you're on. I don't know if anybody else has any comments or questions. Looking for hands raised. Benjamin Diamond. Hey, Benjamin, I'll just let you talk. Go ahead, Benjamin.
Hi. I didn't know if there was a chart about the South Dakota soybean grown in an area of drought. I saw charts for corn.
Yeah, there is a national map that is, I think it's done every week. Correct me if I'm wrong, out of the USDA's Chief Economist's office, and those do get circulated. Not
you
sure
see
where
my screen?
No, I can switch it to that though.
Yeah, I am showing you the soybean in drought. Is this what you needed?
But actually, the map.
I see. Okay.
That helps.
That
And
helps.
the map.
Yeah, there's a map out there. So, and it shows the major crops and the area under I think D1 or worse drought. So that does exist. And here's the web page. Brian Fuchs is sending it to me. Ag and drought at unl.edu. Okay. Are you getting it, Adnan, or should I do it?
You do it.
All right. Let's see here. All right, stand by. Trying to fix everything here. Guess we have to read what's on MSN. Wow. It's sort of not behaving. Whoops. Sorry about that. Ag and drought. What did I do wrong? Well, maybe I missed a slide now. Well, anyway, we'll have to find it and send it to you later, Brian or Benjamin.
Okay. Thank you.
Sorry, I couldn't put it on the fly. Oh, I put a period in the wrong place.
I got it.
Okay, good for you. Let me try one more time. There we go. Yeah, I'm not familiar with this, so sorry. Well, I'm familiar with it, but I'm not familiar with it. Okay, so there's alfalfa, hay, cattle, hogs and pigs, hay, sheep and lamb, milk cows. Where's the rest of it? Anyway, it's there. You can find it, Ben, if you want to find it.
Okay.
Any other questions or comments? I don't see any. I'm going to say thank you to everybody. Thank you, Adnan, very much for your time, and Jeff especially. You both did a great job. We'll do this again, and Brian will help us next time understand what part of the world is under drought and what crop is being affected by it. So thank you very much, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you.